every single week, without fail. In thousands of cities across the world, as the sun begins to set on Friday evening, something extraordinary happens. Phones are turned off, businesses close their doors, families gather around a table set with white cloth, candles are lit, wine is poured, bread is covered, and then silence. Not the silence of loss, but the silence of arrival. What you are about to witness is one of the oldest continuous rituals in human history, a tradition that has survived exile, persecution, the fall of empires, and the march of 2,000 years. And yet, every single Friday, it begins again. This is Shabbat, and once you understand what it truly means, you may never look at your own week the same way again. Welcome to Ancient Israel Revealed. I'm your guide on a journey into the wisdom, traditions, and sacred history of the Jewish people. Today, we're exploring something that 14 million Jewish people around the world practice every single week, without exception, regardless of where they live, what language they speak, or what century they were born in. It's called Shabbat, from the Hebrew word meaning to rest, to cease, to stop. But here's what most people don't understand. Shabbat is not just about rest. It is not a religious rule. It is not simply a day off. According to ancient Jewish teaching, Shabbat is the most holy moment of the entire week. It is the only commandment in the Torah that God himself observed, and it carries within it a secret about time, about identity, and about what it truly means to be human. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, I think you'll understand why this ancient tradition has survived everything that history has thrown at it. Where did Shabbat come from? To understand Shabbat, we have to go back to the very beginning. In the book of Genesis, the first book of the Torah, we read that God created the world in 6 days, and on the 7th day, he rested. But the Hebrew text doesn't simply say he stopped working. The word used is vayishbot, meaning he ceased, he completed, he made holy. Ancient rabbis taught something remarkable about this moment. They said, what did God create on the 7th day? He created rest itself. He created menuha, a Hebrew word that doesn't simply mean the absence of activity, but the presence of peace, harmony, and wholeness. Later, when God gave the Torah to the Jewish people at Mount Sinai, Shabbat was not just a suggestion. It was the 4th commandment, placed at the very center of the 10 commandments, as if to say, this is the hinge on which everything else turns. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. For over 3,000 years, the Jewish people have kept this covenant. Even when they had nothing else, no homeland, no temple, no freedom, they kept Shabbat. Key line: more than Israel kept the Sabbath kept Israel. There is a famous saying among Jewish scholars. Think about that. A people who lived without a country for nearly 2,000 years, and they survived because once a week, they remembered who they were. The Friday night ritual. So what does Shabbat actually look like? Let's walk through it, from the moment the sun touches the horizon on Friday evening. The candle lighting. Exactly 18 minutes before sunset on Friday, the woman of the home lights at least 2 candles. Why 18 minutes? Because in Hebrew, the number 18 corresponds to the word chai, meaning life. She waves her hands over the candles 3 times, drawing the light toward her, and then covers her eyes, and whispers a blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments, and commanded us to kindle the Shabbat lights. In this single moment, the entire energy of the home shifts. Ancient rabbis taught that with the lighting of these candles, an additional soul, called the neshama yetera, enters every Jewish person. A soul of deeper peace, deeper joy, deeper presence. The synagogue. As the candles are lit at home, many Jewish families make their way to the synagogue for the Friday evening prayer service, known as Kabbalat Shabbat, the receiving of the Sabbath. There, a poem is sung that has been sung for over 400 years. Lecha Dodi, a love song. Not to a person, but to the Sabbath itself. The Sabbath is greeted like a queen, like a bride arriving. The Shabbat table. When everyone gathers, the Shabbat table is already waiting. 2 loaves of braided bread called challah, covered by a white cloth. A cup of wine or grape juice, the Kiddush cup, white tablecloth, the best dishes, everyone dressed in their finest. The father, or the eldest present, recites the Kiddush, a sanctification prayer over the wine that declares, "This moment is different. This night is set apart." Then hands are washed in a ritual called Netilat Yadayim, not for hygiene, but as a symbolic act of spiritual preparation. The challah is uncovered, a blessing is recited, and the bread is broken and shared, connecting everyone at the table in one sacred moment. Keyline. Why 2 loaves of challah? They represent the double portion of manna that God provided for the Israelites in the desert every Friday, so they would not need to collect food on the Sabbath. Even the bread on the table carries a 3,000-year-old memory. What Shabbat is really about. Now here is where it gets truly profound, and where I think Shabbat speaks to every human being on earth, not just Jews. We live in a world that never stops. Notifications, deadlines, news, screens, noise. We are constantly producing, consuming, performing, competing. And Jewish wisdom, developed over thousands of years, diagnosed this problem before the modern world ever existed. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, one of the greatest Jewish thinkers of the 20th century, wrote something that stopped me when I first read it. The Sabbath is not for the sake of the weekdays. The weekdays are for the sake of the Sabbath. It is not an interlude, but the climax of living. Think about that. Most of us think of rest as recovery. We rest so we can go back to working. But Heschel is saying the opposite. We work so we can arrive at rest. The week exists to deliver us to Shabbat. There is a concept in Jewish thought called Kedushat Hazman, the sanctity of time. Most religions make places holy, temples, mountains, rivers. Judaism makes time holy. Shabbat is a cathedral built not in space, but in time. And within that cathedral, certain things are set aside, not because they are bad, but because they belong to a different world. No creative work, no commerce, no building, no tearing down, no writing, no erasing, but also no screens, no phones, no rushing. What is left? Family, prayer, study, food, song, sleep, conversation, presence, everything that money cannot buy. Let me tell you how powerful this tradition truly is. In the year 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the Second Temple in Jerusalem, the holiest site in Judaism. The Jewish people were scattered across the world, an event called the diaspora. They had no land, no temple, no king, no army. And yet, every Friday night, they gathered. In Rome, in Baghdad, in Spain, in Poland, in Morocco. They lit the candles. They blessed the wine. They sang Lecha Dodi. Centuries passed. Empires rose and fell. The Jewish people were expelled from country after country. They were persecuted, enslaved, and in the 20th century, nearly destroyed entirely. And still, every Friday night, Shabbat returned. There are documented accounts of Jewish prisoners in Nazi concentration camps who found tiny scraps of candles and still, somehow, observed Shabbat. Still recited the blessings, still sang the songs, under the most unimaginable conditions in human history. Shabbat did not survive because of armies or wealth or political power. It survived because it lived in the hearts of ordinary people who refused to let it die. Keyline. This is what makes Shabbat one of the most extraordinary cultural and spiritual phenomena in all of human history. It is not a monument you can visit. It is a practice that lives in time, and it has outlasted every civilization that tried to erase it. What you can take from this. As Shabbat ends, 25 hours after it began, another ceremony takes place. It's called Havdalah, meaning separation. A braided candle is lit. A cup of wine is filled to overflowing, as a blessing for abundance in the week ahead. A spice box is passed around, and everyone breathes in the fragrance. Why? Because according to tradition, when the extra Sabbath soul departs, the spice sweetens the sadness of its leaving, and then the candle is extinguished in the wine, and darkness returns. But not the darkness of despair, the darkness of anticipation, because in 6 days it will come again. Whether or not you are Jewish, whether or not you are religious, I think Shabbat carries a message that belongs to all of humanity, that we are more than what we produce, that time is sacred, not just space, that the greatest luxury in the modern world is not a bigger house or a faster car. It is presence. full, undivided, unhurried presence with the people we love. The Jewish people have been practicing that truth every single week for 3,000 years. That is a wisdom worth knowing. Call to action, 11:30 to 12. If this video opens something in you, a question, a feeling, a memory, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments, what surprised you most about Shabbat? Have you ever experienced Shabbat or something like it in your own life? This channel exists to bring the wisdom, the history, and the sacred traditions of ancient Israel to the world, and your presence here means everything. If this video added something to your day, subscribe. It takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm that this kind of storytelling matters. New videos every week. Ancient wisdom. Timeless stories. I'll see you in the next one. Shabbat Shalom.